majority of our content and our approach is focused on humans. At what point should now we think about agents as a new persona and start to build more and more content? And I think what happens is a lot of brands start with AEO, right? When they go in, are we relevant in all the LLMs and those products? Are we basically creating content that will be a source that ultimately will give us authority? So when someone searches something that the LLMs will suggest us.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining the Boredom Club today to another episode of the Builder series, featuring executive building the future as we speak. My name is Yossi Gamazia, and I'm joined here also by a good friend of mine, Jason Wolf. Jason.
Hey, Yossi. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
So today we are fortunate enough to interview none other than Chris Koehler, CMO of Twilio, a company that revolutionizing how businesses communicate with their customers, enabling personalized, real-time engagement across messaging, voice, and digital channels at global scales. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not sure I'm fully building the future, but let's get into it. The future is exciting and probably a little bit scary too.
You need to market it to all the people out there. So I guess building is a one way to say it. So I don't know if for the people or for the agents, but we'll get to it in a bit.
Yeah, that's a big question. Yes.
Absolutely. So Chris, you spent most of your career actually in customer success, including even VP of customer success in Box before becoming the CMO there. But I was curious to know, how does being accountable for renewal and retention change how you approach top of the funnel marketing versus, let's say, traditional brand first CMO?
You know, I was lucky enough. I've had many different roles across my career, and including many years both running customer success in the Americas for Adobe and then doing that at Box as well. What was interesting in my Adobe time, I was there for over 10 years. Like, I was always talking to marketers, right? So I was always a marketer at heart, but a lot of the roles I had at Adobe were engaged with marketers. And then I joined Box in a customer success role. And again, I owned the renewals and all of that, and then moved into the CMO gig. And it's much harder to be a practitioner than it is to spout all the stuff you should be doing as a CMO. But, you know, to answer the question, it changed my perspective of being very customer first, right? Where when you're in a customer success role, really helping them get value out of your product, services, whatever that you're engaged with them, it's really putting that customer hat. Are we doing what's right? Or do we really understand the business problem? How can we help them get to value much faster? So I think that was one big thing. I think having sort of empathy for other parts of the organization too. I think, you know, too often in the marketing roles, we may not have enough empathy for like what our peers are dealing with as part of that. And then having revenue, being accountable directly for revenue, right? I've had that in several different roles. It makes me realize like we got to do things ultimately, one, that are right for the customer, but two, that are good for the company. And are the things that we're optimizing for actually driving revenue and growth of the business? Or are they metrics that marketing cares about that maybe others don't?
I bet it was super beneficial both for Box and now for Twilio. And interestingly enough, when you join Twilio, the CEO says you bring your no-nonsense style when you join, right? And it's interesting because now it's the AI era, but what does no-nonsense marketing actually look like in Twilio 2026 roadmap in this new era of compute?
I guess I will appreciate the no-nonsense marketing, just being very transparent and being a truth teller is, I think, something else he might have told me. But I think in this day and age, like it's really easy to be busy, right? But not effective. And so focus on the things that ultimately matter. What I see too often, and especially with AI, I want people to fall in love with the problem they're trying to solve, like not get swept up in the technology. And AI is really easy to get swept up in the technology that doesn't actually solve the real business problems as part of that. So what I'm encouraging my team to do is we have to prioritize, right? We're leveraging AI for the use cases that really matter. We've got to iterate fast because in this landscape, it's changing every day, right? So the activities you did 6 months ago may not actually be relevant, you know, in the next 6 months. So moving to a much more sort of agile framework around that, and then be willing to test things and be willing to fail. right? But if you fail, fail fast because we're going to test things. We're going to do a lot of stuff that's not going to work. And, it was great. I was in London last week with my team, and there was a great example where someone came up on a slide and they said, well, this is what we did last year. It didn't work, right? But we're not giving up on it. This is what we're going to do to fix it, right? And I was like, thank you for actually saying something that didn't work, because too often all I hear about is the good stuff. But I know there's all sorts of things that aren't working. So that's definitely my no-nonsense style.
You brought up AI, so it's a great segue for my next question. What is one belief about marketing that you held 5 years ago that maybe you no longer agree with? Is it marketing now for the agents, or marketing for both the people and the agents, or even something else entirely?
I think if it was 5 years ago, I probably didn't even think about agents at that point. My take on this one is I probably felt like brand was not as important as demand in B2B companies 5 years ago. And if you look at my experience of like where I spent a lot of my formative years, at Adobe, we had the creative side of it, but we were really big on driving digital, right? Creating digital experiences. And so I spent 10 years talking to other marketers about, hey, you should measure everything, right? Digital allows you to go measure everything. Brand is really hard to measure. Don't spend as much money on it. It doesn't matter. It's all about driving, creating, and capturing demand. That's changed for me. And I think the big push on this is too often B2B brands are afraid to be bold, and they're afraid to actually have a point of view and to break through the noise. And I think what has happened, especially since COVID, is we got into a world where everyone went digital. Digital got so saturated that the effectiveness of digital was waning. And so a couple of years ago, was like, oh man, like we got to invest in brand because our digital programs are waning. It's getting harder and harder because there's more competition. Now it's getting even worse. With AI, like you can put out any content in a matter of seconds and you can flood the market around that. So what's the difference? Like brand matters, trust matters in this new world.
Brand does matter, and you also mentioned that marketing need to use AI for growth, not just efficiency, which is interesting, but Twilio is right at the epicenter of marketing, right? So I was curious to know, what is the most growth-oriented ROI experiment that Twilio has run that surprised you in terms of the ROI of it?
We have quite a few examples now, but probably the one that had the biggest impact. And so we had a challenge where if you think about the traditional, especially in B2B marketing, we do lots of campaigns, lots of activities to try to get opportunities, whether those are leads that we're trying to qualify in and figure out, are these the right customers to go spend time with? And that's typically done with humans, as we've got some logic around it, and then we send it to a human, they go qualify that and try to figure out, is this something I want to pass on to the sales team? We created an agent called Isa that we trained that now handles 95 plus, I think, % of all of our inbound. And that changes like how we spend our time. It allows us to instantly engage every customer. Because like what happens in a lot of cases, you'll have inbound come in, someone will raise their hand, you'll do some scoring and you're like, I'm not sure that they're a right account or fit. Let's put them in a nurture program and just send them a bunch of emails until we think maybe they're ready. Now we don't have to do that, right? We have unlimited capacity that Isa can reach out, have a conversation, try to figure out ultimately what that person is interested in. And then Isa can then drive them to an online buying experience, some of our documentation, or flip it to a sales rep to say, hey, this person's really interested in all of that. It has all the context of the conversation, and it goes. So we're expanding this. Isa, this is primarily for our inbound. We're like, hey, how can our enterprise sellers and existing customers, you get leverage as part of this? So it's a great example. It's saved us tons of money, but it's also driven lots and lots of revenue because we're allowed to engage with basically every prospect that raises their hand. We've got infinite capacity.
That's incredible. If you need to choose between marketing versus the execution, where do you see the biggest opportunity to be unlocked?
It's hard to say which one, because I think there's value in both. I would say the majority of people today are focused on the execution. Because it's really easy. Like if you think of like the progression of what's happened, there's an answer. A lot of it has been like, hey, I've got questions, question and answer. Hey, edit this document, make me put this in a different tone. Like that's all the low hanging fruit piece. I think what we're starting to see from a strategy perspective is push our thinking to go after new things that we just didn't think were possible given capacity constraints, in the past. Maybe it's going after new markets that we just didn't have capacity. It was like we've talked about, hey, there's a certain country where, quite frankly, it gets deprioritized. We know that there's an opportunity there. We can't localize the content, right? It's just like it's not possible, it gets deprioritized. Well, what if in a world, we could actually use AI to go after a market that today isn't possible because we don't have enough people to go after those things. So I think the strategy piece is like pushing us into areas where we just didn't think we could go, whether that's new channels, new areas, new products. That's the piece where it's going to be incredibly valuable. The execution is just going to be table stakes. It's like how we execute and run our marketing teams in the future.
So indeed, it looks like a whole new world altogether. But do you see still human in the loop? And what becomes the most valuable human contribution inside the marketing team in this new AI revolution?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're a ways away from not having humans in the loop, right? Although it does seem like agentic stuff is moving faster than anyone imagined just even in the last month. But I'll quote what is uniquely human that I think for the foreseeable future we need to have in the loop. And I'll quote Adam Morgan, my VP of brand. He calls it taste, right? And there's something that is like uniquely human that if this is good or not, and there's like, it goes as like, ooh, is this good or not? Now that's getting harder every day, right? As the models are training and getting smarter and learning. But there's tons of examples where if we didn't have a human in the loop, we would create some content either would be just inappropriate, right? We've had a bunch of we've been testing things and, we tried to localize. I'll tell this story that my team last week was telling me in London, where we were trying to localize a bunch of content and we had something going on in France and we had a different image. And then they, as we were working through it, the image put like a beret on the French version of it. And the team was like, oh God, like, no. That is so wrong. And they're like, okay, this is why you have to have a human in the loop because it learns from images that are out there. So it would have been like a really bad thing if we had pushed that out because it just would have been silly. And there's tons of examples around that where, it's learning from all sorts of content out there in the world, which may or may not be appropriate as you work through that. So I think for a while it's going to be taste. And we're going to show these AI models and agents ultimately what good looks like.
It's definitely hard to distinguish now between reality to imagination of AI or maybe even hallucinations, to say the least. And indeed, you distinguish between personalization to true individualization. But with recent reports showing a gap between the brand perceptions to how the customer is actually seeing it, can you share with us a little bit more about how you use Twilio segments to bridge that experience gap?
It's funny. This word is very polarizing when you talk about personalization, because we've been talking about personalization for a very, very long time. And we've done a bunch of studies around this, which you alluded to, that there's a perception gap of how well brands think they're doing versus how customers actually think brands are doing. And it's pretty wide because it's hard, right? It's hard to provide that context across channels of all the interactions that customer might have had with your brand, to do it in a responsible way, right? So you're not out there grabbing information that feels creepy, to create a personalized experience across channels. So with Segment, what we're doing and what a lot of our customers are doing is really collecting all that rich history of the conversations that you've had with your brand, whether that is across email, across interactions with chat or with voice in the call center or others, to capture all those preferences, right? Understand the context and the history of you as a consumer. What have you purchased from the past? How do we start to figure that out? And you get to a world where you can start to create these one-to-one experiences where you're like, this is a segment of one. Because a lot of what we've done in marketing over the last 10, 15 years is we've said it's personalization, but the reality is There's very little personalization. It's more segment driven, not segment the product, but a segment of people that we've kind of lumped together in a persona that says, okay, these are the type of things we want around this individual. And so we're lucky enough to have a product that collects a lot of that rich data across channels, across platforms, integrates, creates that profile, and then you truly can give a unique experience to an individual versus a segment. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it's incredible because 2 years ago, you couldn't even think about something of that sort in the market. So indeed, it's amazing. And okay, Chris, you're executive, and I guess you a lot of time doing a lot of executive work, going to the boardroom and such. But I guess also sometimes you do need to step out of the boardroom and get into real conversation with the customers on the ground. So I was curious, is there anything that surprised you the most that customers told you in the last 19 days? Maybe even something against what the data was saying, something completely different?
I'm lucky enough, I do get to spend a lot of time with customers, and I do that very intentionally because I think ultimately at the end of the day, hearing it from them matters much, much more, right, than hearing it from our own teams around how are our products helping them? How's our messaging resonating? Are they having success? So, man, there's a lot of examples, both sort of really surprisingly good, where you're like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I had one great experience. And again, some recency bias when I was in London last week with a large energy supplier in the UK. And they walked me through how they really engage customers in a holistic way. And they won all sorts of awards. And it's an energy company, right? For those that live in the US, like you're not talking about how great the experience is with your energy company, that they fully understand you, that they're integrated across channels and they're like creating this incredible customer experience for you as an energy customer. So it's kind of counterintuitive. I was like, wow, this is amazing. If an energy company can do it, why can't every company do that? So I think that was one like really delightful experience that I maybe wouldn't have expected an industry to be that forward thinking and that far ahead. So that was one example. I think we've talked to a lot of, I would describe really large, highly regulated companies. And there's a lot of AI experimentation going, but there isn't fully a lot in production yet because there's such a concern around security and privacy and regulations and all of that. But that's fast changing because you would think in this world, like all we hear about is AI, everything, that you would think it was sort of ubiquitous, that every company on the planet was like rolling this out and you were engaging with AI in every part of your day. We're still very early around that. So I think the reality of like the hype versus what is actually in market, there's a gap there, but it's coming for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And there was the famous study from MIT about 95% of AI experimentation failed because the companies have some struggles to get it into production. So it's interesting to see what is going to be in the next couple of years or maybe even couple of months in this level of
I think
activity.
that's changing. Like, I think and what I'm seeing, and especially in maybe in like slightly smaller organizations where they are starting to get this deployed and having real impact. And I think over the last 6 months, you've kind of seen that change. So it will be interesting to see if they do a refresh of that, if that number changes quite a bit, because I do think that companies are seeing real results. We have some incredible case studies and examples where it is just amazing the experiences they're creating and the growth they're seeing with some of the AI capabilities.
And to be honest, since the experimentation was announced, there was a tons of new AI agents from Claudebot and others. So I guess it's all different ballgame altogether. And okay, so Chris, I do have one last question before I pass the mic to Jason. So everyone, and specifically in the marketing world, talk about being customer centric, right? It's a very flashy thing to say, but can you share with us what does it mean to be customer centric on a weekly basis inside the Twilio marketing team?
It's really easy to say, it's really hard to live. And I would say, my job and what I've tried to instill in the team as well is you have to ask the questions. Hey, we've got this new idea. We want to roll out this, whatever it is. And you have to ask, okay, is this what customers want? Right? What did customers say? Have you talked to any of them about this? Have you tested this with them? So I think that's important, is have that customer in mind and then realize that not every customer is the same. They're not all going to want the same stuff. We really have to think about them very, very differently. I think, like I mentioned before, in marketing, too often we get caught at our desk, whether that's virtual or in an office and you're working, like you got to get out. You got to talk to customers. You got to really get face to face, because I said it before, you get the good and the bad feedback, right? Of what's working, what's not. Give me feedback on this, it with no filter. So I think that's really important. And one of the things, if you're going to be customer centric, it's not always the good stuff that they like. You got to ask them how you can do better. Because that ultimately is probably the stuff that's going to change and have the biggest impact. Because we naturally want to hear all the amazing things that they're doing with us, but it's really hard to ask the tough questions saying, hey, where do we miss? Or like, where could we do better? And that's probably the most valuable.
For all of our listeners, get to the ground and speak with your customers. That's what I will take. Be customer
100%.
centric, but for real. So, Chris, thank you so much for answering all of my questions. It's been really a joy. And Jason, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Yossi and Chris. Been great to hear you so far. I'm going to start to really double down on this agentic and platform-driven focus that we've touched on so far. At Twilio's recent customer and developer conference, Signal 2025, you highlighted Twilio's incredible agentic workflows and the shift towards agent-to-agent commerce. So I wonder, as you market your brand, which you spoke about the importance of, if that's happening to AI agents and they're so driven toward data and logic and less the emotive, creative taste side, as you touched on, how does that impact those marketing decisions, thinking about the brand and how you develop it?
That's a great question. And I talk to a lot of CMOs that are all, quite frankly, trying to figure this out. So if you got any tips, I'd love to know. Kidding.
Unfortunately, I don't.
Yeah. I think there's going to be, for a foreseeable future, and it's funny, we talk a lot about this internally, you're going to have this sort of bifurcation of, hey, we've got to go support both humans and agents. And I think the agentic engagement is still very early, but it is rapidly evolving very, very quickly. So when you start to think about, and I've talked a lot about this with my team, is the majority of our content and our approach is focused on humans. At what point should now we think about agents as a new persona and start to build more and more content? And I think what happens is a lot of brands start with AEO, right? When they go in, are we relevant in all the LLMs and those products? So that's the simple. Are we basically creating content that will be a source that ultimately will give us authority? So when someone searches something, that the LLMs will suggest us. So I think that's sort of table stakes today, but that's constantly evolving. And I think the hard part with that too is that the way they used to optimize for like search engine marketing or paid search is very different than how people search today, where it's much more, I'm trying to solve a problem versus I was like, for us, it would be like, I need a messaging solution. No, it's like, I need a messaging solution that has APIs that I can embed into a product like this. Do you have a recommendation of who that might be? And then, point me to the documentation. That's how someone searches today, which is very different. And you have to optimize around that. So I think ultimately, like, you have to have more content, your documentation matters, all of that. But I was having this debate, and I was talking about Adam earlier. Do brands matter? And does brand matter in this new world? And I think for the foreseeable future, yes, because if you think about it, say you have a world where you have an agent that goes out and you say, go build me, test this, figure out, and come back with a recommendation. I think we're still in a world where you're still going to want a recommendation versus you're going to go deploy a solution. And this is particularly important in the enterprise. So when they come back with that recommendation, if the solution is a set of capabilities, products, APIs, or whatever that you've never heard of, you're going to be like, okay, go do some, like, get me comfortable with this, right? Because if you think about the buying experience today, when people go do that, they do their own research. And they're testing and learning and they're figuring out, okay, is this a real company? Do they have viability, or is this a brand, or all of those things? So I think brand is going to matter, where maybe the AI agent is going to come back with a recommendation. And then ultimately that, the human's going to say, oh, yes, I know about Twilio. Great, let's go with that, versus some company that you've never heard of. So I do think it's changing, and we're going to have to balance both of those things.
It does resonate. Ultimately, we're quite a ways away from really truly outsourcing to these agents. I think one other thought that comes to mind that you touched on before is the importance of taste and discernment in making decisions, and even teeing up evidence for you to consider. For the sake of time, we've got so many interesting questions still to ask you. So I'm going to pivot to the next one around your incredible conversation relay product. It's really enabled developers to build human-like voice AI agents. So I'm wondering, will the CMO of 2026 spend more time marketing to human customers or optimizing agent-to-agent interactions?
My sense is it'll probably still be heavily human, even if we could shift our entire organizations to start thinking through, okay, that's just going to take time, right? So we're almost the first quarter into the year as we work through that. But I think that shift will change over time. And so I think that the sort of modern marketing organization is going to have to think through, what content do I create for both the human and the agent? And what's that balance, and what's that shift over time? And each company is probably going to be slightly different. My sense is the more complexity, the higher stakes of whatever that decision is, financial services, healthcare, you're still going to have some agentic component, but there's still always you're probably going to want to have a human in the loop. But if you get into, I need to order food, pizza, low risk stuff, groceries, that stuff is just going to be you're going to tell your agent to go do all of that and not be worried about it at all. So you're going to have to think about that in a much different way as a marketer, because you're going to see adoption much faster in the lower risk transactions.
The other thing that I think is incredible about Twilio is these rich contextual payloads to combine warehouse data with real-time triggers. I mean, just to make this more concrete for the listener, I guess you could imagine with some sort of travel booking site, and instead of just sending some generic mail that says, don't forget to complete your booking, it says, hey, we found a window seat for you, and we know that you love using your points. Would you like to use your balance of X points toward the next booking? That's a much more personalized experience that's enabled by these RCPs. And so I'm curious, does this technical update change the creative side of a marketing campaign?
This is where AI can help scale, right? Because if you think about the different iterations of content, we've been talking about having sort of this notion of dynamic creative optimization, where you're take this image and create 50 versions of that. I think when you get into a world, and I'll give an example that we were talking about yesterday. So imagine you're a brand, you want to invite a customer to a World Cup match that's coming up this summer, right? And you're okay, well, what do I know about them? I know that, they're from Australia. I know that the World Cup match is between the US and Australia is in Seattle. I know that they're an avid Delta fan, right? And maybe it's Delta saying, hey, I want to give that person an offer to go fly to Seattle as part of that, with some co-marketing with someone to get them to the match. All that stuff is possible, right? Because you've got rich data that you could go out, take that data, create that unique, like we talked about, individual experience, take what you know about them in that profile, and then send them a message that is unique. I mean, that's where we're headed. And I think that, the technology is all catching up, and it's going to be there. It's just a matter of as marketers, can we act upon all these experiences and get really excited about it?
It's almost overwhelming how much there is to act on now. So good luck on figuring out how to prioritize in this new world.
Yeah.
But I want next questions really around telling one story around this growing platform that you have as Twilio. You sit at the intersection of comms, data, AI, and your product catalog is growing. So how do you keep that story of what Twilio is unified?
It's probably, we have to be very focused on where we're spending the time and how we're telling the story. Recently at our sales kickoff a few weeks ago, I shared with the global sales team, when you start to think about, we are fortunate enough to have a platform that solves a lot of use cases. And, that platform is horizontal across many of the departments in an organization. So we have a lot of personas or people that we sell to, from marketing to customer support to engineering to product. It's sales. It's like lots and lots of different personas. And then we have different products that match as part of that. So for us, it's like taking a step back, focusing on the platform. Here's the unique capabilities that Twilio has. We ultimately want to be the platform that AI companies build on in the future. And then we demonstrate that through both customer stories and through basically use cases. Here's what we can go help you solve. Because people aren't trying to buy technology, they're trying to solve customers' problems. And so if we can frame it in that way, where our platform allows you to do all of these use cases, that's a much easier way to go to market than talk about every capability and feature that we have, because there's just too many around that.
That seems like a great way of solving that paradox. Okay, and the next set of questions are going to really be around your own personal reflections and advice for others. Where do you believe modern B2B marketing over indexes today, and where is it still under investing?
I think I probably gave this away in one of the earlier answers, but I still think we're relying as an industry too much on digital marketing, right? And I think the effectiveness is waning. And so I would say people still hold on to and probably spend too much, which becomes less effective. And they're to answer the second part of the question is think they're still underinvesting in brand and partnerships. And so they work in conjunction with each other, but too often it's like either or. Do we do brand and awareness, or do we spend it on? And the reality is that the better brand that you have, the more awareness that you have, is going to open up doors. It's going to give you more pricing power. It's going to allow you to cross sell other products. But like, we're not thinking about it that way. We're too often thinking like, hey, it's either we do this or we do that. This we can measure. So it's easy to focus on digital. And that's where too much, I'd say, money goes to.
Hiring in the age of AI, what are you looking for when you hire people in today's AI-driven world?
Curiosity. Because, I think I couldn't even have imagined 5, 10 years ago the opportunities and the way that we run marketing today versus 5 or 10 years ago. It is so radically different. And if anyone is paying attention to what is happening in AI right now and how disruptive, this literally is the most disruptive but exciting, potentially exciting time to be a marketer. And I think you have to just have natural curiosity to dig in and learn and figure it out and keep up with it. And every day you need to be learning something new. When we hire, we're not hiring for that. They're going to fall behind. So I think curiosity is probably the one way I would tee it up.
I love that. I love that. Just keep on learning and never get tired of it. All right, a little more personal. Who's been the greatest mentor you've had, and what's been their contribution?
It's hard to pick one. I've probably had 3 to 4 with similar, I would say, similar things of why they were so important. And I think it's really easy to surround yourself with people that are going to tell you all the things you're good at. And when you have a really good mentor, they are going to give you the uncomfortable truth of the stuff that you need to really change or work on. And I've been lucky enough in my last couple companies to have an individual that has given me that feedback, but also given me that opportunity where, quite frankly, I probably wasn't qualified or ready to do it, but set me up for success. And then on the flip side, not giving me the opportunity that I wanted, knowing that I would probably fail and it would be not as good for me. And so I've had both examples where in the moment when you want an opportunity, you're like, I'm qualified, I can go do this. And they're like, nope, like, you're not ready for this. You don't want to hear that. Now you reflect a few years later, and then you're like, yeah, they were probably right. But, it's not easy in the moment. So I've been lucky enough to have a few of those.
That's wonderful. If you could have coffee with anyone dead or alive, who would it be? And also why?
It's funny. My answer has always been like, oh, it'll be Michelangelo or someone like that. They'd be so interesting. I have this this fascination, in our family, we have to talk about polymaths, right? Where generalization and talk about multiple people that are really good at multiple disciplines and like creating connections is part of that. But I was talking to my wife, I was like, hey, this is a really interesting question. I was like, who would you say? And she was like, I don't know. What about like someone like, I don't know, Jesus, like trying to figure out what did you actually teach? Like, and we're not over religious, but you're like, that is an interesting idea where you could go have a Q&A of like, what was your actual message? If are people using that in a very different way than what you meant it, or did you even see any of that stuff? So that was just kind of one of those funny things where I was like, I guess that would be kind of interesting for sure.
I love that choice. So one last question before I pass it to Yossi. Imagine you weren't in tech, you weren't, a CMO. What would you be doing in an alternate life?
I would love to be a professor. And my wife's got a PhD. She's taught classes. My son teaches classes. I probably in retirement, I will teach more when I've got more time around it. But I just love digging in, learning, and helping people get passionate about certain topics, especially marketing. So I'd probably say professor.
Well, I've had many professors that have had an outsized impact in my life. So maybe in your retirement, you can do career number 2 and make that impact on others.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all from me, Chris. Thanks for fielding those questions.
Awesome. That was fun.
So, Chris, I do have one last question before we wrap it up. What is your favorite movie of all time?
Oh my gosh. The one that like pops to mind is probably Legends of the Fall. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but with Brad Pitt, and it's just like such a complex story where it's like realizing that life is both amazing but also tragic, and how you survive and thrive and react to all of the tragedies and like stuff's going to happen in your life and how you respond to it and your outlook. We watch so many movies, but that one is probably the one that we always refer to as one of our favorite in the house.
Absolutely. So, Chris, thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure hosting you. And for everybody else in the audience, so stay tuned. We have other amazing episodes as part of the Builder series from the president of Cisco, president of ServiceNow, CMO of Snowflake, and a bunch of other interesting folks. So stay tuned.